His Majesty the King conferred the order of Je Khenpo, which is the highest recognition in the Kingdom of Bhutan, to His Holiness Je Khenpo Trulku Ngawang Tenpi, as we celebrate the 25th anniversary of His Holiness the Je Khenpo's attainment as the 70th Je Khenpo of Bhutan. We bring you a special program. And now we have the honor of having with us Trulku Ngawang Tenpi Ninjyed, who is the reincarnation of the 9th Je Khenpo, Kyabje Gyalwa Sakya Rinchen. Trulku Ngawang is currently pursuing Buddhist studies at Tago Institute for Advanced Vajrayana Studies. And virtually we are joined by Lebe Choten, a Buddhist researcher from Kyoto University, all the way from Japan. Thank you for joining us, La. To begin with, we would like to know from you, La, a brief history of our Je Khenpo, La.
So, His Holiness, to actually talk about the lifespan of His Holiness, I think we would take a whole season of this show, episodes of this show, to actually cover the whole lifespan of His Holiness. His Holiness was born in the year 1955 on the 5th day of the 7th month in the lunar calendar, to Father Dorji and Mother Choten, actually the only child. And so later on, and then His Holiness was recognized by Kyabje Sonam Dema as the reincarnation of Geshe Gyalwa. And later on, His Holiness studied in Darjeeling under prominent Buddhist masters like Kyabje Gyalwa and Kyabje Gyalwa. And then after that, he came back to Bhutan to study under Kyabje Gyalwa Sakya and Kyabje Gyalwa. And so, in short, His Holiness is actually really learned in both the Nyingma school and the Kagyu school under one of the most prominent Nyingma and Kagyu masters. And later on, His Holiness became the principal of Tago, and then after that he became the Lopen of the Tashithang, and then the Dorji Lopen. And finally, at 40 years old, he became the youngest Je Khenpo Bhutan ever had. But these are actually the highlights that almost a lot of people knows. But something special about His Holiness, his life, is that even though he was recognized as the reincarnation of a Buddhist master, he was not really some sort of enthroned as a very high Rinpoche and then had a pedestal wherever he went. But instead, rather, His Holiness had a lifestyle where he had the most rigorous training and studies, but at the same time, he pretty much lived the ordinary life of an ordinary monk. And even when he came to Tago and then studied under Je Khenpo, the 68th Je Khenpo, and Je Khenpo, the 69th Je Khenpo, His Holiness was actually at one time the secretary in the office, and also he was also the chant master at one time, the Umze, and so things like this is actually makes His Holiness's life actually a very special and something very different from a lot of Buddhist masters who were actually just an ordinary monk who later on became a master, or a Rinpoche who has been recognized and enthroned from a very young age and then groomed in a way. But instead, His Holiness actually had the best of the both of the world, and where I feel that this is something very special about His Holiness, and this actually makes a very takes a very big influence in whatever His Holiness does later on in his life.
Yes, even as for ordinary Bhutanese, I think we have known Je Khem as a very humble human being.
Yes.
So just to add more, if Levi Chete could tell us about our Je Khem's enthronement as well.
Greetings to all viewers, and thank you, BBS, for inviting me to this talk show along with Venerable Gyalwa Sakya Rinchen. Yes, of course, this year is incredible as we celebrate the 25 years of enthronement of His Holiness Trulku Ngawang as the 70th Je Khenpo. We are jubilant not only to celebrate the occasion, to offer our gratitude to His Holiness, but also it is a day to pay tribute and gratitude to His Majesty the King, who actually made this occasion for the people of Bhutan. Like Trulku mentioned that yes, the life and liberation of His Holiness is very profound and vast, that people like us cannot comprehend. Like Trulku mentioned that yes, His Holiness Trulku Ngawang in his previous life was born as Geshe Pema, who according to the autobiography of His Holiness is said to be a very renowned master. And very interestingly, in the later part of his life, Geshe Pema is said to have foretold to his friends that he will return back to the world once again to continue his legacies. So based on this prophecy, His Holiness was conceived and born to Father Rizal Dorji and Mother Kensang Choten on August 22 in 1955, corresponding to the 5th day of the 7th lunar month. And on this day also, I think we should not forget to pay gratitude and thanks to Kyabje's father and mother, who actually give us this precious source of refuge for the people of Bhutan. And beside that, the Rinpoche's mentioned about his monastic education and all, so there are some a very interesting fact and figures of His Holiness, which actually was narrated by His Holiness himself. Until the age of 15, His Holiness was called by different names given by different masters, from whom he received series of initiations on empowerments and teachings. So at the age of 8 in 1962, His Holiness met with the Drukpa Thukse Rinpoche in Darjeeling and was named as Ngawang Yenten Tsiltim Jamso. So according to His Holiness is said to have a tendril that have attributed for having maintained his vows or celibacies pure and unbroken to this day. And again later at the age of 11, His Holiness was also named as Padma Trulku, or a lotus born, along with Gelsen Trulku. So until that, so Rinpoche His Holiness met with great renowned masters, both within, inside, and outside Bhutan. And finally, at the age of 15, it was in 1966. So at the age of 15 in 1969, so His Holiness visited Tago Monastery for the first time, accompanied by his own father, and he received an audience with the late Je Khenpo, His Holiness Je Khenpo Rinpoche, who at that time was the abode of monastery. So Je Khenpo Rinpoche asked about the name of His Holiness, but Father submitted that they were not able to decide as to which one to keep among different names given by different masters. So then Je Rinpoche later confirmed to Jigme Chedra, which actually was given by Dijom Jigdel Ishiduji as the official name of His Holiness at the age of only 15. So if you look at this, the sequence, so His Holiness until the age of 15 had met numerous great masters whom he has received the series of empowerments within the Drupakaju lineage and outside, let's say, Nyingma Sacha. So if you look into this account, so His Holiness has been groomed as a very non-sectarian great Lama, which we can see today in the eyes of all Bhutanese. So that's what I can add, what I can complement what Gyalwa Sakya Tiku has mentioned.
Yes, and as ordinary human being, we have very less access to have audience with Je Khenpo. So I believe you have personally met Je Khenpo at a very young age. So if you could share with us your experience.
Yes, I did have the. I was fortunate enough to have a few encounters, personal encounters with His Holiness, and I think the first one ever would be when I started blabbering about being a reincarnation of a master, and then so finally His Holiness confirmed it and officially recognized me. So I think it was during that time, on the 10th day of the third month, I went to His Holiness' abode in Punakazong. So that was the very first time that I had met him. And of course I was actually 4 years old, and so was very too young to remember anything very clearly. But one thing that I can remember is that there was only 4 people in the room, and there was this one elderly monk that I really adore. So I actually called him by his name in front of His Holiness, and His Holiness was graceful and humble enough to actually tell the monk to come in and sit with us to have tea, and said that it was a very good omen that 5 people can have the tea together. And that's the very first time that I had the opportunity to be in his presence, and even from that point, I think the image of His Holiness was, to me, a very compassionate and understanding being who actually it was observant and humble enough to actually grant the wishes of a 4-year boy who was actually nagging and shouting for someone else in front of the Je Khenpo of Bhutan. So I think this was my first impression, and has always been a very profound and deeply endorsed memory of His Holiness for me.
And now, as a grown-up, as a scholar yourself, how would you describe Je Khenpo?
So actually there is no argument that His Holiness has proven to be one of the most accomplished Buddhist master of all time, from any point of view, from an academical point of view, or from the point of view of a practitioner, or from the point of view of as the Je Khenpo of Bhutan. There are undeniable achievements that His Holiness has accomplished, and therefore even for me personally, I was by the time I was born, His Holiness was already the Je Khenpo. So to us and many other people that my age, to us, whenever we hear the word Je Khenpo, the very image of His Holiness appears, because this was the one Je Khenpo that we've been seeing and we have known. So to be in a position like that, and still have the humbleness that he has, I think makes him a very, very special person. And I can actually recall one time that when I had an opportunity to have an audience with His Holiness, and I will not say what the subject was about, but during that time His Holiness said that this posts and positions actually comes to those who actually really don't want these posts just for the sake of fame or fortune or anything. And so that it was just the same case with His Holiness, because he said that while His Holiness was studying in Darjeeling, he said that he could have almost sworn that he will never take any posts, any high post in any monastic body or anywhere. And yet again that he had to become gradually one of the highest position in the monk body in Bhutan. And I think it's one of those, it's these people who actually really refrains from taking the posts like His Holiness, is because they know the responsibility and the weight that the post carries, and therefore when they are appointed, I think they actually prove to be the most capable for the post. And so this is another encounter that I will never forget. But as a person, I would say His Holiness is such a great example that last time in 2020 during the pandemic, and when His Holiness the late Je Khenpo passed away, we had the opportunity to have a almost more than a month-long ceremony presided over by His Holiness. So it was a very fortunate opportunity for myself too. And during that time, what I noticed was that during the morning breakfast time, whenever the attendants brings His Holiness's food, it was brought in the tolom tapa, that the traditional Buddhist wooden bowl, and then it was covered with a red cloth, and then the curry cup was on top of that, and it was just that, no tray, no fancy brocade, just that bowl and that cup, and I was actually really surprised. So during one of the breaks, I asked the attendant, why do you bring His Holiness's food like that? And they said, His Holiness strictly advised them not to bring him in a tray in front of in the center, in the middle of all this sangha, because it is very inappropriate to actually do that. So I was actually really embarrassed to hear that, because at some stages we were served in trays with like brocade covered trays with all these fancy bowls and cups, and then to see the Je Khenpo of Bhutan sitting on that throne served with this simple wooden bowl covered in the red cloth, not even a brocade, and his cup on top of that, and being served like that, was actually, I think, I don't even have to explain it. It really shows what kind of a person that His Holiness really is.
Right, that's beautiful. And Levi Chete, if you could also share with us about your personal experience with Je Khenpo and your personal view about our Je Khenpo.
So thank you. Unlike Gyalwa Sakya Tiku, I'm less fortunate to have audience more than occasionally, but still then, in general, we as a Bhutanese are very fortunate to have been born in Bhutan, which is indeed a heaven on earth, where the people enjoy the complete freedom under the guidance of His Majesty the King. And secondly, we are more fortunate to have the chance to test the nectar of Dharma from His Holiness. So I consider I'm also one of them to get a chance to test the nectar of Dharma from His Holiness on more than few occasions. So like rightly Gyalwa Sakya mentioned that, yes, to our common knowledge, His Holiness is the chief abbot of Bhutan who oversees the religious affairs of the country. But more than that, I should say he is the personification of Arya Avalokiteshvara or Phaba Thuji Chimbo Chenrizi, who dedicates for the welfare of Dharma and sentient beings through loving kindness and compassion. So there are many factors that personifies His Holiness superior than the true human being on earth. So if I to compliment on some of the extraordinary of His Holiness is, so when His Holiness was asked whether he is emanation of the Bodhisattva, a personification of Siddha, or a Mahapandita, His Holiness answered, I would delight to discard self-interest and persevere for the welfare of beings through loving kindness and compassion. I would forsake the pleasure of 8 worldly affairs and delight to equalize the life in practice. I would be more delightful to gain mastery in the Buddha's words and treatises through explications, debate, and composition. So therefore, looking at this kind of like a very explicit, a very inspiring words from His Holiness, thus we can conclude that His Holiness totally refused to accept the title or designated name given based on the mere word base of virtue without possessing the qualities that personify the title and name. So based on this, I think we without any exception can convince ourselves that His Holiness is none other than the true personification of Phaba Thuji Chimbo Chenrizi. So this is what, as a person, as a recipient of a nectar of Dharma from His Holiness, this is what I think.
That's very insightful and beautifully described. And since Levi was mentioning and even Rinpoche was mentioning that to talk about achievements and contribution of Je Khenpo to Bhutan will need another episodes. But I think right now we'll briefly talk about Je Khenpo's contribution to Bhutan in last 25 years. If you could shed some light on it for us.
Yes, His Holiness has actually, not only after he became the Je Khenpo, I think way beyond that and way before that, His Holiness started his divine journey of serving the universe and all beings. I think, of course, like from incarnation to incarnation, but I will just talk about this life. Even in this life, I think way before he became even a WB, or before he became the principal of Tago Monastery, His Holiness has been doing things that as a Buddhist we should be ever grateful for. And one of that is as a Buddhist monk, I think the preservation of the vow, the bhikshu vow, that especially in the Kyabje sect, that has been passed down from Khenpo and of course from the Buddha, but then in the Kyabje sect, the vow, the continuity of the vows passed down from Khenpo holds a very significant value to the continuity of the vows. So I think when His Holiness received that vow, and then to actually to have them so pure up until this time, like for decades and decades, and for us to have actually received this is something that not every ordinary layperson will understand, but such a gratifying achievement that we can never forget. But of course, as in the last 25 years, as Je Khenpo, I think one of the most revolutionary and groundbreaking achievement as a Je Khenpo was that His Holiness actually started to go around the country and start preaching. It's called traditionally it's called Tinani, and so this he actually went to so many dzongkhas to actually give teachings and interact with the people and be with the people, and giving all these teachings and initiations and all the transmissions. And later on, of course, more than ever, he actually constituted the Melam Chembo program in every single 20 dzongkhas. And from a Buddhist point of view, as a Buddhist monk, I think this is one of the greatest service that Bhutan can give to the world and the universe at large, which was actually initially started by His Holiness. And the power of prayers that can actually benefit the world is, from a Buddhist point of view, is so immense that I think this is something that we shall ever preserve and never forget. And because the reason I say this is that it's actually quite funny to think about it in this world at this time, where somewhere in the world 100,000 people are in a stadium watching a football match and then cursing against the opponent team. In Bhutan, in this small country, in this underdeveloping country, 100,000 people gathers in a district and then actually prays for world peace and for the universe at large. This actually kind of proves that someone like His Holiness could, what someone like His Holiness could actually to actually show such leadership that to steer us in such a direction that is so special in a time and world like this at the moment.
And Levi Chete, if you could also tell us about Je Khenpo's contribution to the country and the world.
I think Gyalwa Sakya has covered many achievements. Again, coming to the contribution and achievements that His Holiness had made to the country is immeasurable. Still then, I will briefly explain into three categories. Firstly, His Holiness contributed to the nation's peace and security. So though His Holiness is physically away from us and cannot be seen more than occasionally, but he keeps the welfare of the nation and people in his heart and prayers. And secondly, he protects the nation and people with the armor of loving kindness, compassion, and wisdom. So this is how he contributed for the nation's peace and security. Secondly, His Holiness has contributed largely to the sustenance of Dharma through major reforms and consolidation in both monastic institutions and monastic education. So beside that, the establishment of Melam Chenmo in every nooks and corners of the country, and the reforms in the proceeding of performing ritual in both homes and in the cremation ground is one of the major reforms that benefited the community and had strengthened the long-standing tradition of Bhutan. So this is how His Holiness has contributed for the sustenance of Dharma. Thirdly, there may not be even a single man in Bhutan who does not know His Holiness or who haven't tasted the nectar of His Holiness. Let's say all the people in the country, starting from the kindergarten, school-going children to old-age parents, have at least seen and tasted the nectar of Dharma from His Holiness. Again, even the presence of His Holiness and his Buddhist mission has greatly influenced the Buddhist community and the people in general in overseas also. So His Holiness has served and contributed for the welfare of the country, Dharma, and the people. Thank you.
Right. And since we are celebrating the 25th years of His Holiness's succession to his title, we don't see any grand celebration, and then I think it's kept low-key, and then I think most of the people are also curious that why is Je Khenpo not here in the capital, and when can we have audience with him? So if you could share.
This occasion is undeniably a very special and memorable occasion for every single citizen of Bhutan, and as students we were really excited to actually celebrate this anniversary, this 25th anniversary of the Silver Jubilee of His Holiness's enthronement. And therefore the Tashithang has actually planned out a grand celebration and ceremonial occasion, and His Majesty personally instructed that to actually make this celebration in the best way possible, and that all any financial support will be given by His Majesty and the government of Bhutan. And that's why two of our Level Hengis from the Tashithang went all the way to Kyoto to request His Holiness to come here so that we can actually celebrate this occasion in His presence. But then, surprisingly, His Holiness actually rejected the request and said there are far more important things to actually invest our money and in energy during this time, especially during the pandemic, and so that he specifically instructed not to make this a grand celebration, especially nationwide, and just keep it as simple as possible to just a program broadcasting on BBS. And for the monasteries, for the zongs and every monasteries and shelters to actually conduct more prayers for the world right now. So, and even afterwards, His Holiness sent a letter through his secretary, an official letter to instruct every zongs and monasteries and tatsangs to do more prayers for the world right now during this Silver Jubilee, this celebration, as a dedication to His Holiness. So I think this really shows how compassionate and humble His Holiness can be, and I think this comes to a quotation in a Buddhist text comes to my mind about this. It goes something like "Sirda bhonganyam bi pashola linji pinsotapchang chigiti di tulanak bi chizuna tugongyo suzuba juchitaas." So this verse basically says that for the sublime being who doesn't see a difference in value between a gold and a lump of earth, even if you offered, even if you fill the universe with jewels and offerings and then offered it to him, this will not please him. But rather, if you practice what his aspirations are and fulfill them, then this is the best offering to a sublime being like that. So this quotation really comes to my mind, and this really shows us that the priorities that we have to choose in a time like this is, I think this is such an extraordinary leadership and example that is shown by His Holiness, and therefore that's why this is the celebration is kept very low key, and every monasteries and satsangs are conducting more prayers for the world right now.
I really wish we had more time, but since we are running short of time, as we end our program, if Libby could also share your message for our viewers.
I'm short of any message, but I will quote some message from the advices of His Holiness. Like I mentioned before, one of the heart essence among many advices that His Holiness the 17th Je Khenpo Ninjyed has given to the people is to emphasize the 6th level mantra of Arya Avalokiteshvara. So, in a recent handout, letter penned down by His Holiness, has earnestly reminded once again the people to embrace and practice the 6th level mantra. I quote from the provisional translation. Seeking refuge in charity and reciting the 6th level mantra is greater than any other methods needed to liberate oneself and others from the state of bardo to the state of liberation. I unquote. So therefore, if we today if we embrace the advice of His Holiness, then it is our tribute. It is our sincere tribute to His Holiness on this very special occasion. I think this is the unlike the national grand celebration. If we individuals make this kind of a tribute and embrace whatever the teachings, advices that His Holiness has given to us, I think that is more than enough as a gratitude to His Holiness in this special occasion. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Levi, for despite your busy schedule, joining us all the way from Japan.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
And Rinpoche, your advice, your message for our viewers.
So I think Levi Choten put it more briefly and beautifully than I ever could. And I also don't have any personal messages, but I think something that we can really learn from this occasion is how it's being conducted, the celebration, according to His Holiness's instruction. And this in itself is, I think, such a profound teaching that we can actually imply in every walk of life, and especially for us Buddhist practitioners, because we tend to sometimes focus on the outer means, and that we forget to actually preserve the essence of the teaching and practice. And so now I think more than ever it is our responsibility, we as a Buddhist citizen, to actually pay this debt to His Holiness for the tireless effort and dedication that he has put in the last 25 years to actually fulfill his aspiration. And that is simply, I think, being a harmless, compassionate and humble human being who can still think about and pray for the world, even though we are in we're just a poor developing country with no prominent resources to actually be in a state where we can actually help the world, but still have that compassionate aspiration to actually work for a better world. I think that should be that would be my message to all the viewers, like, to actually live a life according to His Holiness's aspiration, as a token of gratitude for all this effort and dedication that he has put in.
Lasla, thank you very much, Rinpoche and Lewi Chete, for your time and sharing your insight with us. Thank you.